Hey guys, Brooks here. Today we're going to be talking about calculating max heart rate so you can figure out your heart rate zones if you are following heart rate zone training in classes at Arsenal. So the first method is going to be a simple formula that will give you an approximation of what your max heart rate is, and then I'll tell you how to find your zone 2 from that. The reason we're training at different zones here is because we know that we get different responses and benefits from training in different zones. And what we find is that depending on the type of fitness that you do, most people only train in a few zones. If someone is an endurance runner or competitor, they do biking, running, swimming, whatever it might be, you can bet that most of the time they're spending most of their times in zone 1 and 2, which is good, but they're not reaping any of the benefits of going into zone 3, 4, or 5 as often as they should be. And they're probably not getting the strength, they're most certainly not getting the strength benefits that you guys get from coming in and lifting weights each week. If you've been crossfitting for a few years doing functional fitness, it's safe to say that we spend the vast majority of our times in zones 3, 4, or 5 and avoid doing most, if any, work in zone 2, right? Which is where we know that our body is going to metabolize fat for energy and give us an array of other health benefits. So there's a lot of benefits to training within heart rate zones. So if it's something that you're interested in, we're going to talk about how to calculate your max heart rate. So the first method is to take 220 minus your age. And this will give you an approximation of your max heart rate. So for me, I'm 33. 220 minus 33 is 187. That is low. I've seen my heart rate get up into like 200, 202. So for someone who's been training, they might do this, and it might seem low, but it's a good place to start. From there, to find out what your zone 2 is, you would just take that, whatever that comes out for you. Again, for me, it's 187. 70% of 187 is about 130. And that would put the top of my zone 2 around 130. Now, what I know, because I wear a heart rate monitor, is that is a little bit low. That's actually the middle of my zone 2. My zone 2 falls between 120, like 122 to 143. So that would put me right in the middle. So it gets me pretty close. And with zone 2 training, you want to err on the side of going slower than not, in order to make sure that your body is utilizing fat for fuel and you're not switching up into a higher zone where your body might be using carbohydrates. If you use that equation, that's great. Like I said, it's an approximation. It's a good place to start. And then you can just take, okay, well, what's that number times 0.8 and then times 0.9, and you'll have the rest of your zones for the Arsenal heart rate zones that we have for your base, your push, and your all out. Method number 2, right, which is a better method, is going to be checking your wearable and just looking back in the past and seeing what the highest heart rate is that it has registered. If you can go in, it might take a little bit of just Googling to go in and see exactly like where those records are stored. But if you go back and you see the highest heart rate that you've ever recorded, we can pretty much safely assume that is going to be close to your maximum heart rate. And then same deal, you can just take that number, multiply that by 0.7 to get the top of your base, multiply it by 0.8 to get the top of your push, and then multiply it by 0.9 to get the top of your all out zone. Now, having said this, it's definitely better than the equation, but not all wearables are created equal. I spent last week working out with a Whoop, my Garmin watch, which is pretty much the same technology as an Apple Watch, and a chest strap monitor. And what I will tell you is that at lower heart rates, the Whoop and the watch tend to do just fine, but at higher heart rates, they are way, way off. With both the Whoop and the Garmin, I had trouble registering a heart rate over 162, and I was pushing very hard. And my chest strap monitor had me registering like around 190. So I mean, it was really like at any given time at higher heart rates, it was 20 to 30 beats off per minute. So just be aware that while it is any wearable that you have is better than nothing, if it's the further away from your heart that it is, the less accurate it's going to be. And then you factor in all the waving around that you do with your wrist, depending on where it sits on your wrist. If it's not tight enough on your wrist, all these things can factor into how accurate these wearables are. So if this is something you're interested in, you really want to give this training a go, highly suggest buying a chest strap. And just downloading an app to your phone that you can monitor and just glance at during the workout. I posted the recommended one in the Facebook group yesterday. It's a Polar H9, and they have a great app that will show you exactly where your heart rate zones are once you figure out what your max heart rate is. I think it's like $60. Method number 3 for figuring out your max heart rate, and this would be the best method, would be to have a chest strap, ideally, right? Or just take whatever wearable you have and go through some sort of ramp test or some sort of test that is going to start you out a little bit slower, build you up, build you up, build you up. And you essentially, if you're on an assault bike, or an echo bike, you might say, okay, we're gonna do a minute at 60 RPMs, a minute at 70, a minute at 80, or, maybe you go up in 5 RPM increments, whatever it might be, until you can no longer hold that. And that'll give you exactly like what your max heart rate is, right? So you might be on that and you might be able to push yourself up into like 190, if 195, maybe even 200. Obviously, everyone's going to be a little bit different. Fran, which we have tomorrow, is also another great test for max heart rate. When we do Fran tomorrow, we're doing it with the goal of going as fast as possible, not to really RX the movements of the workout, but to see how fast you can go and how high you can raise your heart rate within that workout. So if you do have some sort of wearable, tomorrow will be a really great test for you to see exactly where your max heart rate is. There's another element that we can layer onto this that would be the gold standard for figuring out exactly where our zones are. And that would be to have be wearing some sort of metabolic analyzer while you're doing a ramp test. So you might have seen these things before. There's a few different companies who make them. It's essentially a mask that you put on that processes the amount of oxygen versus CO2 that you're breathing out, and it'll tell you exactly exactly what point your body switches from metabolizing fats for fuel to metabolizing carbohydrates for fuel. We do have one of these coming. It's just like on back ordered 6 to 8 weeks. When it's here, anybody who's interested will be able to run through the test, but that really will be the gold standard of figuring out exactly like where your specific zones are in conjunction with a chest strap monitor. If you guys have any questions about best practices for calculating your heart rate or how to get the most out of your wearable, just let me know and I'll be happy to sit down with you guys and help you out in any way that I can.